Hey, and welcome to Trail Trials, a video review section of iRunFar.com. My name is Travis Lyles, and in this video, we're going to take a look at the Sense Ride 5. Let's check it out. All right, so let's start off with the basics. Salomon describes this shoe as a do-it-all shoe. Very versatile, anything from short and fast to ultra distance. It is a 8mm heel-to-toe drop, coming in at 21 and 29. There's some decimal points in there, but it's listed at 8. It is about 295 grams in a men's size 9. That equates to about just under 10.5 ounces, 10.3, so it's definitely a mid-ish weight shoe. Lugs are 3mm and 5mm in depth. It's got an updated ride or cushion from the previous version. Let's get up close and personal and talk about what these updates are and how this shoe performs. Let's check it out. So from an outsole standpoint, this is fairly standard, low profile lugs, general terrain, I would say. So roads, trails, whatever. Kind of does a little bit of everything, but it's not focused necessarily at anything specifically. Very well rounded. The lug patterning in the back is for, of course, going braking. So backwards facing lugs, and then as you move towards the middle, you can see there's a little bit of a gap here in the middle of the shoe where there aren't any lugs, and then it transitions to rearward facing lugs. Those lugs are going to be very much for climbing, and you can even see some very specific lugs here in the middle with this triangle and a little bit of a divot in there. Goal of that, of course, is as you're climbing and sort of terrain is muddy or loose, that this will sort of accumulate a little bit in there and kind of add some extra traction. I don't know that you can totally feel that specifically as you're moving around in them, but overall, I think this outsole excels in a lot of things, with the exception of really slick, kind of smooth types of things. Think about walking across a log that maybe is over a creek, or a rock in that creek that's lightly wet. This is not a great amount of friction that gets sort of created here with this. It's very slick. I would even say sometimes like the white line on a road, if you're road running, this and that white line seem to be very opposing as it relates to traction. Not great for that. But everything else, general purpose outsole, works really well in a variety of conditions. All right, moving on to the midsole here. One of the areas where this shoe has been updated from the 4 is absolutely in the midsole material. The Salomon Sense Ride 4 had a real vibration to it, and almost to the point where anything over about 15 miles for me, my feet were really, really tired from wearing that previous version. Happy to say that's been updated. This is a softer compound, or at least more energy efficient, and definitely feels like whatever's been done here to change how this ride is, it is much more comfortable. You can run on the road, you can run on the trail, you can run in a lot of different scenarios over a lot of different distances, and that foot fatigue that I experienced in the previous version in the Sense Ride 4s is gone, and this is definitely a better, more rounded midsole. And in terms of what this midsole is, it is considered moderate. So not too spongy, but also not too stiff. And I would say when you compare it to other kind of midsoles, it's actually very reminiscent to me of some Hoka's. Which is weird to say on a shoe that doesn't really have a big stack, but it's got a similar, I think, foam type of feel that Hoka's do. It's kind of squishy. You can see my thumb here, really able to sink inside of it, but it's also got bouncy and rubbery and some energy return. And you can do that both in a tactile feel, but also while you're wearing it on your foot. And it's single density all the way around, so you're not looking at any type of pronation control or anything like that. The only thing that you may notice is a little bit of this toe kind of coming up, so there is a bit of a springy ride to it. So this would be totally flat, and of course the toe comes up, so you do have a bit of a rocker type of feel. It's not super pronounced, but it is an 8mm shoe, so it does sit up a little bit higher in the back than maybe the field, if you will, of trail running shoes. But I don't really notice that 8mm stack that sits in this shoe. This feels fairly controllable, fairly good ground feel that comes out of this, despite maybe a higher than normal heel to toe that I'm used to. From an upper standpoint, engineered mesh here, I will say that in comparison to some engineered mesh that I've encountered before, this is a lot stiffer, which is nice. I think some of the engineered mesh that's in road shoes is very, very stretchy and not very applicable, I think, to trail running shoes. I think it's too stretchy. Your foot kind of moves around a lot. None of this. For my foot, again, narrow heel, wider forefoot, this shoe is able to lock down, and I don't feel any of this mesh like giving way, but it's also not so like stiff that you know it's cumbersome in that range. So I think a nice amount of mesh on here that's breathable, that mostly lets water get out and let your foot do its thing, but also not being so stretchy and over-engineered that it's really only viable in a road shoe where you're not like sharply turning around corners and things like that. This does have the Sense Fit on it, so you can see that through here. Basically, it's very similar to a lot of other shoes where the overlays here on the outside have corresponding anchor points to the laces, and then when you pull that all tight, that creates this wrap around your foot, but no stitching on these things, very much laminated onto the upper itself, and then the laces, of course, use kind of the famous here Salomon pull tab lacing system to really lock everything down. You can see it from the bottom. This is very much a standard fit for a Salomon. Lots of their other shoes are very narrow, specifically sort of through this middle part of the foot and the heel. This is more of a standard fit. So if Salomon in general, you need a little bit wider fit, this shoe falls into that. From a tongue standpoint, it's fairly thin, but it is gusseted, so you get a nice wrap here, enough cushion to sort of keep the laces from feeling like they're pressing on your foot, so the tongue actually extends with padding all the way down. It's not just this upper part and sort of some mesh and things in here. It does sort of cover the whole foot, so you can crank this down a little bit without feeling too much pressure on the top of your foot. It has the lace garage here, so that once you pull your shoes tight, you can kind of tuck that away and keep it all a little bit cleaner once it's all laced up. From a heel cup standpoint, it's fairly flexible, which is nice. There's a little bit of rigidity towards the bottom part, but it's still fairly light. You can see I'm kind of pushing down through all of that. But I still felt, even with the inability to sort of use the upper, like there is no uppermost lace because this is the lacing system, I was able to get a good heel lockdown with this shoe. Fairly good padding in the heel collar and sort of a deep cup as it extends back. So it sort of creates a nice little carriage here behind my foot. And again, I have a bit of a narrow heel, and this lockdown more than adequately. I actually didn't even think about it, which is a totally good sign overall. So last thing I'll call out is this shoe was white when I got it. I'm not sure about the viability of white trail running shoes. They look cool like the first time. I do like white sometimes. It's, I don't know, fun to race in. But this one's a hard one to keep clean, so if you like to keep your shoes clean, maybe avoid the white one. In closing, I think what you've got here is pretty much what Salomon describes on their site. And the Sense Ride 5 is not a specific shoe. It's not a one individual job type of shoe where it's just meant to go fast or it's just meant to go slow or whatever. This is really a well-rounded shoe. And if you kind of look at some of their other, like the Pulsar or the S-Lab Ultra, they can be a little bit narrow. When you look at the bottom of this shoe, it has a pretty good width to it. So I think this fits more feet. It's got generally a more stable platform to it. And I think when you're thinking about a kind of a do-it-all shoe, this sort of makes all the componentry that you'd want. It's got, for me, a pretty well-fitting upper. Speed lacing, of course, is potentially controversial depending on what you like in laces, but it does a pretty good job of making a nice wrap overall around your foot. It's not too heavy, it's not too light, it's not overly protective. The lugs aren't overly aggressive, so it just sort of checks a lot of boxes for being a shoe that covers a lot of ground. My only gripe, and this is not just this shoe, but Salomon's in general, I feel like are a really interesting mix sometimes of having these sort of rugged outsoles while not really giving a ton of protection And the Sense Ride 5 is not any different. If you have a sensitive foot, you're probably not going to like this shoe over extended periods of time on really technical and kind of pokey terrain. I feel like this, other shoes in their stable that don't have the Pro Feel film, when you step on something kind of in this midfoot area, you tend to feel it. And again, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. You like ground feel? You're actually going to get that out of an 8mm drop shoe with a pretty good mid cushion. So I do think that helps with kind of going faster and sort of proprioception and feeling all those things. But once you step into, I think, longer ultra distance, I got some fatigue from technical terrain kind of over and over and over, specifically on some kind of really long downhills. This is a general purpose shoe if you're going to be on that really heavy terrain, technical, aggressive, pokey, jagged, maybe not exactly the right shoe. So questions, comments, leave those below this video. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.